To be alienated does not only mean that one suffers a split within the personality, that one feels estranged from himself, that one does not know himself. Certainly that's an aspect of alienation, and this is the way it's talked about in the psychology books, you see. And when you read all of this psychology, you think you're really getting heavy, you see, and the Eurocentrics teach it to you very directly, and you feel very profound when you talk about the great dynamics, struggling with one another. Why do you alienate a person? We are alienated so that we can serve aliens. That is the function of alienation. Alienation means to be determined by forces outside oneself, other than oneself, to the enhancement of those aliens. When Marx talks about alienation, then, do not just cue in on the alienation that the worker feels. Recognize that the worker has to be alienated in order to serve the owner of the means of production. That's its ultimate function. You will recognize then, an alienated people can only spend money with aliens. They can only support aliens. They can sit here and support these Koreans and these Arabs and these Indians and everybody else but a black person. They can support everybody's families but their own. They can give jobs to these people's uncles and aunts and sisters and brothers and children, but they cannot give jobs to their own children. They can feel good when they give all of their money to Bloomingdale's and these other places, but they feel cheated every time they trade with the black person. You have to be alienated for that reason. That's why we alienate. And do you think the white man intends to turn that feeling of alienation loose in your heart? You are dead wrong. No matter how often you go into a boardroom, no matter how high you move up into the white hierarchy, because alienation is functional for white power and functional for white economic, social, and political dominance. And yet I see somebody expressing surprise after 40 years that black children still have a sense of inferiority, because you don't know your black psychology, and because you studied them from a Eurocentric psychological point of view, and because you saw your goal as not removing the white man from power, but of sleeping with them in these beds, and not questioning the evilness of his system, but of wanting to share in it. We never had a national debate. Who gave the NAACP the permission to go out to court and talk for black people in terms of equality? Equality with whom? We should have debated that. That's a moral issue. Equality with the slave master? Equality with exploiters? Equality with people who, every time they stepped on a continent, destroyed and degraded the people that they dealt with? Is this what we want, a sharing of the spoils? Or is it that we want a whole different world than what these people have bought on this earth today? But we were diverted from asking that fundamental question. We were made to think simply because we were getting paid less than white folk, our problem would be solved merely by getting equal pay. But the problem is much deeper than that, ladies and gentlemen. But that too is a part of the illness, you see. So then the maladjustment is used and is induced in the African to engage in self-destructive behavior so that he may annihilate himself, or that his demise can be permitted or enacted without triggering Eurocentric guilt and without costly resistance. It was induced to permit the European to perceive himself as naturally superior, to protect the European from genetic annihilation. While I'm on that subject, let me just mention one quick thing here about genetic annihilation. Some of you saw this, I'm sure. U.S. News and World Report, June 22nd, 1987. What does it say here? Are we having enough babies? You know whose question that could be. Of course, this is a piece done by Ben Wattenberg. Some of you might have seen him at various places, and he's doing a very interesting thing now. He wrote a book called The Birth Dearth. indicating, of course, that not enough white people are being produced in the world. And so he starts here, what's happening today has never happened before. It will dramatically change the U.S. and the world in which we live. Over the years, I've heard businessmen, diplomats, government planners, and parents all begging for the same thing. No surprises, please. This book, a speculation about the future based on current trends, is an attempt to deal with that plaint. Forewarned is forearmed. What is happening is this. For about a decade and a half, the peoples of the free, modern, industrial world, that includes the U.S., have not borne enough children to reproduce themselves over an extended period of time. We had a baby boom. Now there is a birth dearth. I believe that the birth dearth will, in the near future, begin to cause turbulence at every level of our economy. I believe, too, that the birth dearth will leave in its wake tens of millions of unhappy adults who will end up with no children at all, or fewer children than they really wanted, or no grandchildren, or fewer grandchildren than they had hoped for. I believe the demographic and immigration patterns inherent in the birth dearth will yield an even smaller proportion of Americans of white European stock. And this will likely cause more ethnic and racial tension and turmoil than otherwise would occur. That's what you see. People concerned with what? Their genes, maintaining their ethnicity, seeing it as an important factor, not trying to obliterate it the way we and our assimilationist people have tried to do, not trying to forget who they are, but trying to hold on to their identity. This is one of the challenges of Afrocentric education, by the way. And one of the things that we have to look at, what would happen if these Europeans begin to disappear from the face of the earth? What will happen if they decide that they are not going to disappear and want to make some other people disappear? How are they going to deal with their low birth rate? What are the political implications about that situation? It has very serious implications for African people. And these people are now getting ready to deal with it. I believe further, he says, that the birth dearth may well turn out to be of great harm to the broadest value we treasure. It will make it difficult to promote and defend liberty in Western nations and the rest of the modernized world. Talking about white folk, certainly couldn't be talking about us in terms of liberty. Primacy and prosperity. And he's talking about here, we live in a community of free and modern nations banded together in a loose but real alliance. These nations like to argue. They argue about strategic defense, about who will buy cars from whom, and about whose wine shall be subject to what countervailing duties. But beneath the bickering, something remarkable has happened during the last four decades. This community of free modern nations has shaped and molded the nature of the entire world, a direct admission of their role in the world, you see. We've shaped and what? Created the world. Now that is being what? Threatened. And what are we going to do about maintaining it? You think that these people are going to let you free? You've got another thought coming. Economically, technologically, culturally, geopolitically, and in many ways militarily as well. In other words, we've shaped it militarily as well. It's interesting sometimes when I see the Europeans talk about their boys being killed, and of course I was being killed along with them. They talk about gets being robbed and others being robbed. But remember one thing, if you're being held up out there in the streets by knife or gun, it's a gun you've sold to them. And if black boys and white boys are being killed in Southeast Asia, 9 times out of 10, they are killed by weapons sold to the very people that are killing them. Ye that what? Lives by the sword shall what? Die by it. You think you can go around the world selling billions and millions of dollars of jet planes and weapons and not yourself ultimately be victimized by the very things you sell? These sellers of death will ultimately be the main victims of their own tools of death. By 1950, when this Western moment was in its early days, the population of the free modern world comprised about 22% of the global population. That's amazing even at that, isn't it? That 22% of the population could have control over another, 88%. Today we are 15%. By the year 2030, we will be 9%. A reasonable extrapolation to the end of the next century brings the Western proportion down to about what? 5%. But we still want to be in control. A question arises, will our values continue to dominate in a world where our population shrinks to 9%, shrinks to 5%, even lower? And he goes on to talk about population and power. Can you see again? Let's look up, I hope I'm not holding you up too long. I'll be through shortly. I just want to make a few other quotes from this. What happens when the West is less than 10% of the world, less than 5%? Do mere numbers of people equate with power and influence? Consider first the military situation. There are populous nations that are not big powers, China and India, but only populous nations can become big powers. The United States and the Soviet Union. The advantage of a large labor force and economies of scale are of vast importance. Brute economic production is one critical aspect of national strength and security. Larger populations can build more easily the infrastructure that supports national defense. And attaining technological leadership requires a large critical mass of scientists. Can we begin to see now why you cannot produce a large number of black engineers and technological people? Why the African world must remain ununited and disunited? Because these people recognize quite clearly that uniting of African people, the social organization of African people, the social and economic networking of African people spells the end of European power and dominance. It's stated right here that, do you ever think, and I know it must amaze you at times, of the influence that Jewish people have in the world. I read with great dismay here about 2 weeks ago the demands that they were laying on the Pope, and how they had the Pope going. It's an interesting situation. And yet you think about it, there are only about, 15 million of them in the world? Maybe even less. And yet, there's a major Jewish political organization in Washington that literally vetoes everything that the United States government does. That the United States budget itself is submitted to this organization, that this organization literally determines who and what nations and what groups will get what from this United States, even though this group is less than 3% of the United States population, ladies and gentlemen. It's an amazing situation there. Here are a people, population-wise, are smaller than a gnat. When you compare them with something like, 400 million or more African people, or more than 500 million Indian people, more than about 1 billion Chinese, and you can name one major population after another, and yet these billions somehow are unable to control their circumstances, and a tiny little group is able to literally manipulate this country and influence what goes on in the world. Reminds me of something some of you read today in today's New York Times. You heard about Mr. Le Pen over there in France, running for office, very famous because he wants to run the Africans and the Asians out of France. Wasn't doing too bad either. Jean-Marie Le Pen, France's leading far-right politician and candidate for the French presidency, has caused an uproar with the statement that the Nazi gas chambers were a minor point of history. No problem until he mentioned that. Several political figures said that they would even vote to lift Mr. Le Pen's parliamentary immunity so that a defamation lawsuit could be brought against him. Political analysts and politicians said this was the first major slip, note that is first major slip now, by Mr. Le Pen, whose political campaign focuses on reducing the number of Africans, African Asians, and Arab immigrants to keep France French. So that wasn't his first major slip. It was only when he related to the Jews that he really made it, and that really cooked his goose. As long as he inveighed against Africans and others, as long as he talked about keeping them out and denying them, no problem. As a matter of fact, he was ascending in French politics. As long as he wanted to keep French, all of France, French, and all of that, no problem, no major issue. No major slip. But as soon as he said this business about the gas chambers and how Jews were executed might be a minor point in history, he was in serious trouble. This is the first major mistake Mr. Le Pen has committed, because these ideas that everyone thought, these are the ideas